4 talented devs create a game based off the theme Seasons. But there's a twist. Each new developer joins the growing team and can collaborate with everyone who came before, but previous devs get permanently locked out of the project. Was this collaboration a hit destined for a new season? Or were there too many creative cooks in the kitchen, leaving an unseasoned mess? Let's jump right into the action with dev number 1.
Hey everyone, I'm ChipMicro. So I've done a few of these Pass the Game challenges, but I've never been the one to actually start the project. This is a big responsibility that I won't take lightly. One thing I have learned is the best final products seem to come when the first dev doesn't do too much and leaves lots of room for the creativity of the next developers. So my plan is to make a pretty open skeleton of a game that can be easily expanded and modified based on the skills and creative preferences of the next developers. So the theme is seasons. So the first thing I thought of was nature. Spending time outside with friends, enjoying the great outdoors, breathing in fresh mountain air. But I'm a game developer, so I've never done that, but sounds nice. So what if we make a hiking game? It could be a puzzle platformer that takes place inside a Bob Ross painting. The player would have the ability to control the seasons, which would change different environmental puzzles. For example, a lake could block your way, but then you could turn it into winter so that your character could walk across the ice to get to the end of the level. So I loaded up Photoshop and started painting some backgrounds, but then disaster struck. My trusty drawing monitor just suddenly stopped working, and I only had a few days left to pass on the project, so I quickly ordered a new tablet on Amazon and went and waited for it to arrive. But while I was waiting, I began to think, do I even like hiking? Can I even paint like Bob Ross? I think I gotta pivot. Alright, so here's the new plan. Let's make something more up my alley. How about a game where you play as the goddess of the seasons, but in this world you are a forest guardian, protecting your forest from invaders. You have 1 year to rid the forest of the enemies, or the forest will die. The central mechanic will be the calendar, which will act as your health and mana bar. Moving, taking damage, casting spells will all cost you days of the year. And then the cost and the effect of different spells could change based on which season you're currently in. For example, a fireball in the winter might cost twice as much to cast and only do half as much damage. Alright, so let's start with grid movement. Now we can add the days of the year that count up as you move around. Now we need a room generator that'll randomly pick a new room every time a player enters an exit tile. A new room can easily be created by duplicating floor tiles into any shape you want. The room manager will automatically grab all the tiles and add them to a grid array. Alright, now let's add an enemy and write a basic A-star pathfinding script so that they can navigate the oddly shaped rooms. Alright, the last thing we're missing is the card mechanics. So let's add a hand of cards and let the cards move around smoothly, drawing and discarding cards. Now we'll use scriptable objects to make it easy to create and modify cards. Alright, hopefully this is enough to get a cool game started. I'm going to write up some documentation and pass it off to the next dev. If you like what I did here, check out my channel on YouTube. Also, you can wishlist my game Moondrop Miners on Steam. Alright, see you later everybody.
Are you tired of spending hours debugging Unity code instead of just creating? Meet Bezi, an AI development partner that actually understands your project. Bezi writes custom code, builds shaders, and implements new mechanics in minutes. So if you need a fix, Bezi pinpoints the problem and codes the solution. If you want to understand a complex system, it breaks it down for you instantly. It even helps you identify performance bottlenecks and move towards more efficient optimizations quickly. With agent mode, Bezi doesn't just suggest changes, it makes them directly in Unity for you. And don't worry, your project integrity and data privacy are totally secure, so your project stays 100% yours. If you're interested in checking out Bezi, there is a free tier to help you get started at bezi.com.
I had the project for 5 days to work on it, but due to my packed schedule, I only had 2 of those days to actually work on the project. So I knew that I had to be quick and efficient with the changes that I made, which was significantly slow when I downloaded an incomplete upload of the project from the Google Drive, leading to a bunch of issues that I didn't resolve until the second day. Now these issues meant that the game wouldn't run properly, but Penguicorn had kindly left a ton of documentation on how the game should run, along with a brief description of what he was going for. So after a mountain of reading and a bit of work here and there, I was able to get the game in a semi-working state, which was perfectly fine for now. From my observations, the game seems to be broken down into different handmade stages that are spawned in randomly from a list. Each of these rooms are made out of individual tiles which the player then uses to move around using a turn-based movement system. The game also has these cards which, due to my downloading issue, don't fully work. So I decided that instead of fixing the cards, I wanted to improve the levels and add some more variety to the gameplay. I started off by making some small visual changes like randomizing where levels spawned within a range, and then adding a transition when you change to that level. I then started brainstorming as to what I could do to add more variety to the levels. What I ended up doing was adding in some new tiles with some custom behaviours. Now thanks to all the work Penguicorn had done making these tiles, this was as easy as writing a small script with some custom behaviour in it, and then adding it onto the tile game object. With this workflow I made 3 tiles. The spike trap tile, which damages the player with some spike visuals, the health tile, which will heal the player, and a glass tile, which disappears when you walk over it. I envision this being used to create some interesting puzzles, or maybe even as a way to dispatch of enemies by making them walk over these tiles and then fall into the void. To support these tiles, I also gave the player some health and made it so when you run out of health, it triggers the game over state, which allows you to restart the game. And whilst adding in the lose state, I also decided to add in a win state, as the game seemed to lack one. For now, I set it to trigger when you visit a certain amount of rooms, but this should be fairly easy to change if another dev wants to do something different with it. Now, as good as Penguin has been setting up the project, there was one thing that I was a little bit taken aback by when I first opened up the project, and that was the organisation in the scripts folder, or rather, the lack of organisation. So one of the last things I did was to spend some time moving related scripts into their own folders to make it a little easier for later developers to find stuff. And after that, I updated the documentation with the changes I had made, added in the missing files, and did a little bit of visual polish like adding in some particle effects for the fireball ability and the health tile, all before zipping up the project and sending it off to the next developer. And that's my time up. I've really enjoyed working on this, and I wish the next dev the best of luck. Thanks to Lazy for having me, and go check out my channel if you want to see more stuff from me. Oh, and wishes the Flux Phenomenon on Steam as well. Bye!
Hi there, it's me, Dio from Cowsins, the developer behind the award-winning asset FPS engine on the Unity Asset Store. So my first impressions of the game, the concept is actually very solid, and the gameplay was pretty much there, so I focused on closing the game loop and adding more content and sort of balance the game, so all left to do for the next steps would be to polish the game, use it up, and improve the visuals, cause let's be completely honest, this looks terrible for now. I got started by adding 20 new unique types of cards. Yep, you heard it right, 20 of them. Only a few are available in the initial deck when you start the game, and the rest will be unlockable as the game progresses, and we'll be talking about that later. We got cards with unique effects such as Blood Price, which trades 1 HP for 40 coins. We got Icebound, freezing a random enemy for 2 turns. Spring Grace, healing you 2 HP, or my favorite card, which is Vernal Hit, and it attacks in the facing direction for 3 damage and refunds 1 day per enemy hit. And the list goes on. The map pool was very small as well, so I designed a few maps with new tile types as well, including new ways of navigating through the map with the inclusion of TPs. To add some more variety and new features to the game, I decided to add a currency system, so enemies now drop coins that can be used to purchase goodies and cool cards in the shop. And speaking of enemies, I of course added some more red guys you gotta kill. We've got these small fast enemies with low HP, then there's this big slow red bean that can soak up a ton of damage, and trust me, you'll want to take him down from distance, cause getting cut up close is a bad idea. Finally, there's the standard enemy, which has balanced stats more or less, with moderate speed, HP and damage. And that's all for me for now. I wish I had more time to work on this because it's actually got so much potential. For now, I'd give it a 7 out of 10, mainly for the potential alone.
Hi, I'm TheShelfman and I make game dev videos, mostly talking about my game Skies of Avium. It's a survival crafting game in the sky with Greek mythology and lots of automation, and if that sounds interesting to you, you can wishlist it on Steam. Also, I write books, so there's that. I believe I'm the final developer of this project, so that immediately makes some words come to mind. Balancing, bug fixing, and polish. And I promise to you, if I can throw some twinning in there, I absolutely will. But I should probably open the project first and see what I'm actually up against.
Okay, there's the project. I don't know why I look like this, why I'm not just a regular webcam, but that's okay. I should probably play the game to see what I'm doing. Why is it 1.5 times the size? Why do I feel like there's text there? It's a card game? It's a card game. Oh boy, I am the final one and I'm expected to make this game look nice? Oh no. I quickly realized that I had run into a massive problem.
Somehow upon receiving the project, something had gone very wrong. The UI was a disaster, and for some reason a lot of things that were aligned to be in a certain corner appeared outside of that corner.
I have to ask a question here.
I shared my concerns and learned that everything was fine with the previous dev, which is of course the last thing you want to hear when you're running into problems. It works fine for me is the worst nightmare for literally any developer of any kind. But I ended up fixing it by changing the canvas reference resolution and moving everything back to the preferred spot. Now, the reason I'm apparently here. The art. I know I said I wanted to focus on balancing, bug fixing, and polishing, but unfortunately that's like the next step, and we're not gonna get to that. That's something you would do after you have art. I played the game and it took me a little while to understand what exactly it was, but once it clicked because of the calendar and the fact that it played a little bit like a roguelike, I knew exactly what to do. Over the years, I've gathered quite a lot of different assets from the Unity Asset Store, and this would be important. They were gonna save me. Particles, environment models, monsters, and a player character. Like I said, I'm not very artistic, but if given enough time, I am okay at making things look nice by combining a bunch of assets. So I got a bunch of particles in the world depending on the season you're in. I got these plant-based enemies to fit the setting, and I got this human-like character because I didn't have anything else I liked. It's important to be honest. I genuinely tried my best with the little time I was able to spend on it. I gave the cards colors and added a clean font, and while I don't think the game is pretty or anything, I do think it's a massive upgrade from what it was before. We'll just ignore the clouds that I failed to get into the project because it was acting weird with the lighting and stuff. They never happened. Anyway, if I had to give this a rating when it comes to the potential it has, I would have to probably go and be really honest here and say a 5 out of 10. I think that the core concept is pretty cool. It's a pretty interesting concept with the calendar, but at the same time, I think it's not that interesting. Art aside here, because that is obviously a whole different thing. I think the core gameplay loop is interesting, but not something that's interesting enough to explore beyond this almost game jam approach. That's why I would say probably like a 5 out of 10. But I wonder what you think. Anyway, that was it for me. I tried. I think the concept is cool, but it definitely shines through that it was made by a bunch of programmers.
It's funny you say that because I don't even really see myself as a programmer. I'm an artist in the games industries. I was like, I'm sure there'll be another artist somewhere along the line that I'll do something with this.
From my experience as the last dev, I was like, oh crap, what do I do? So I had to figure that out with the visuals.
I can see they've been putting some work on the graphics side of the game, which is cool. I love the design of this enemy. It looks like a Pokemon or something.
I certainly felt that there was a really solid base that was there, and it was really, really easy to build off. I went the direction of expanding the tiles, because the core look was sort of already there, but adding bits onto that, expanding it. That was an enjoyable experience.
Like the actual concept of the game is super cool. I can actually see this game as some sort of hyper casual mobile game or something.
This is the kind of game where if you wanted to take it to 100%, it'd be a ton of work. One of the things I wanted to try to do was make the entire game sort of resource system the calendar.
Yeah, I think using like the time or the calendar days instead of coins specifically probably would have been maybe a better road to go down. I actually think having the health bar though works out a lot better. At the very beginning of the game, you've essentially got 365 health. So it would strike that balance of feeling excessively overpowered in the early game, but very underpowered in the late game, which is actually the wrong way to have things, I think, in a game like this. You have to earn being overpowered, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. Especially for something that like this game, like it ended up being like a much more sort of casual style game. And I think having the clarity of a health bar definitely just cleans the whole thing up a lot.
I was finding that towards the end of the game, I was in the last couple of rooms, and then all of a sudden I'd run out of days. It needs some form of way to show time as drawing to an end. I know it goes to different seasons and there's that visual change, but I really felt like it took me about 20 minutes to get through the whole game, and that was because I was in the last room, and then all of a sudden, bam, out of days.
Like a big old deadline, like circle
Yes.
date on the calendar.
And a very daunting 5 days left.